Imagine waking up to a Nigeria where decades-long grievances meet the harsh verdict of the law. That is exactly what the nation is digesting right now. The headline reads, Tinubu under fire, why releasing Nnamdi Kanu now is Nigeria's only option. And by the end of tonight's broadcast, you will decide for yourself whether release is indeed the path to peace or further instability. But first, remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you stay informed on every major development. Here's what's going on. Nnamdi Kanu, leader of the outlawed indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, has just been handed a life sentence by Federal High Court, Abuja, under the presiding of James Omotosho for terrorism-related charges. The court found that Kanu's broadcasts and directives through IPOB and his media outreach helped incite violence and attacks on security agents and civilians, a verdict that has deeply polarized Nigerians. But the story isn't that simple. For many, this verdict has reopened old wounds rather than healed them. Critics argue that the legal foundation of the case is weak. Supporters say that the law used to prosecute him, the statute under which he was charged, was repealed long ago, making the basis of the trial void. Let's break it down further. On one side, there is growing pressure from civil society groups, regional voices, and interest groups calling for what they call a political solution. For instance, the Rule of Law Accountability and Advocacy Center, RULAC, recently declared that releasing Nnamdi Kanu is a necessary step towards national healing. Their argument, Nigeria has spent too long treating dissent and political agitation as criminality, and this heavy-handed approach fuels more alienation, more insecurity, especially in the southeast region. RULAC argues that the continued detention of Kanu, even after ambiguous legal proceedings, only deepens mistrust between the state and many citizens. On the other side, there are those who believe that releasing him would embolden violent separatism and send the wrong signal that agitation and incitement can be pardoned. Indeed, one school of thought holds that by proving Kanu's role in inciting violence, the court reinforced the idea that self-determination done outside constitutional order cannot be tolerated. That was part of the logic in the court verdict. So where does this leave us? Or rather, where should it leave Bola Tinubu's government? The case for release is not simply about mercy. For many, it is about restoring trust, affirming that justice in Nigeria means equal justice under the law, not selective persecution. It is about acknowledging that decades of marginalization and heavy-handed repression have consequences. Releasing Kanu, according to advocates, would remove a major rallying point for violent elements and open the door to dialogue and reconciliation. Moreover, some recent developments may suggest that release is not off the table. As of yesterday, the governor of Abia State, Alex Otti, led a delegation to visit Kanu in prison in Sokoto, signaling that efforts to secure his freedom remain alive. But if that happens, if Tinubu's administration yields, it will not come without backlash. Many Nigerians, especially victims of violence and insecurity, will view it as vindication of agitation by force, a slippery precedent. Others will claim it smacks of political maneuvering ahead of future elections. Ultimately, this is more than a court case. It is about the soul of Nigeria, whether we choose force or dialogue, punishment or justice, division or unity. Now, while many voices are clamoring for Kanu's release, we cannot ignore the simmering tensions across the country. In the southeast, particularly in states like Abia, Enugu, and Imo, Kanu's life sentence has reignited demonstrations. Some peaceful, others unfortunately violent. Markets have been shut down, roads blocked, and there's a growing sense of frustration among residents, who feel the government has ignored their calls for fair treatment. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly why this story matters. The government has to think carefully. Every action now has ripple effects. Remember, like this video, and subscribe to stay on top of all updates as they unfold. Politically, Tinubu is under enormous pressure. On one hand, releasing Kanu could be framed as an act of reconciliation, an olive branch to the southeast. On the other, it could be seen as weakness by critics across the country, who fear that such a move might embolden other separatist or agitating movements. Tinubu's team has reportedly been meeting quietly behind closed doors, weighing the pros and cons, with advisors divided between those favoring dialogue and those urging a hardline approach. Legally, the situation is equally complex. Some experts have pointed out that Kanu's case was mired in irregularities, from the interpretation of terrorism laws to the procedures followed during his trial. This ambiguity has fueled calls for a presidential pardon or conditional release, arguing that the rule of law must be consistent, not selective. Meanwhile, civil rights organizations are pushing for dialogue, insisting that continued imprisonment without addressing underlying grievances could backfire. Now let's talk about public sentiment, because this is crucial. Social media is buzzing. Twitter, X, Facebook, you name it. Every hashtag from #FreeKanu to #JusticeForAll is trending at one point or another. Influencers, opinion leaders, and activists are weighing in. And this is where you, dear viewers, also come in. Your voice matters. Comment, share, engage. It's part of the conversation shaping Nigeria's future. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because we will keep bringing you real-time developments as they happen. Adding another layer to this story, neighboring communities and even international observers are watching closely. Some diplomats have suggested that the handling of Kanu's situation could affect Nigeria's image globally, especially regarding human rights, democracy, and rule of law. So, Tinubu's administration isn't just handling a domestic issue, it's a test watched worldwide. Meanwhile, on the ground, the people feel the weight of the situation. Families affected by past IPOB-related violence are calling for justice and accountability. At the same time, communities sympathetic to Kanu feel victimized, believing that his arrest and life sentence reflect bias and political calculation rather than fair adjudication. This dual narrative keeps the tension high and the stakes even higher. Economically, the unrest has implications too. Some businesses in the southeast are reporting losses due to disrupted trade, transportation, and general uncertainty. Analysts warn that prolonged unrest, even over a single issue, could affect investor confidence, and Nigeria cannot afford that right now. Tinubu's decision, therefore, is not just political or legal, it's economic too. Finally, let's not forget the human element. Kanu's supporters see him as a symbol, a voice for their grievances. His opponents see him as a threat, someone who incites division. And in between are ordinary Nigerians, tired of instability, desperate for peace, and yearning for a solution that works. The question we're left with: can Tinubu navigate these treacherous waters to find a path that balances justice, peace, and national unity? One option Tinubu could pursue is a conditional release, where Kanu is freed under strict conditions, including a commitment to dialogue and renunciation of violence. This would allow the government to show goodwill, open lines of communication with IPOB supporters, and possibly reduce tensions in the southeast. The benefit: peaceful engagement could gradually restore trust between the government and communities feeling marginalized. It could also calm protests, reopen markets, and encourage normalcy in affected areas. However, this approach requires careful monitoring. Kanu's actions post-release will be scrutinized. One wrong move, one incendiary broadcast, and the government could face public backlash for appearing too lenient. A full pardon would mean Kanu is completely free, no strings attached. Advocates argue this could be a historic move, signaling Nigeria's commitment to reconciliation and national healing. It might even pave the way for formal inclusion of former agitators into mainstream politics or regional dialogue committees. The risk: critics argue that a pardon might set a dangerous precedent, encouraging other separatist groups or agitating leaders to pursue confrontation, thinking that persistence will eventually yield freedom. It could also anger victims of past violence, who may see this as justice denied. Keeping Kanu in prison is the hardline approach. The government might justify it by insisting that releasing him could embolden violent movements. The problem: protests and civil unrest could continue or escalate. Social tensions in the southeast could worsen, and the perception of selective justice may deepen divisions. Economically, prolonged instability could hurt trade and investor confidence, especially if unrest spreads beyond the region. A compromise approach could be phased release combined with structured negotiations. For example, Kanu could be released temporarily to participate in peace talks, with the option of returning if conditions are breached. This scenario attempts to balance accountability with reconciliation. It sends a message that the government is serious about both justice and dialogue. But it requires strong institutional capacity to monitor compliance and prevent any form of renewed agitation. Now, looking at public sentiment, social media and community voices, it's clear Nigerians are divided. Many youth leaders and civil society groups have expressed support for release, calling it a step towards healing historical wounds. Meanwhile, families affected by past IPOB violence are vocal, demanding that justice be respected to prevent repeat incidents. Politically, Tinubu's decision is high stakes. Handling Kanu's case could define his legacy, either as a leader who sought unity and reconciliation, or as one perceived to have ignored rule of law in favor of political convenience. The timing is also critical, with upcoming elections and regional politics in play. Every move is under the microscope. International observers are watching too. Nigeria's handling of the situation affects its global image regarding human rights and governance. Releasing Kanu could be interpreted internationally as a gesture of reconciliation and maturity, while continued detention could be framed as heavy-handed and unjust. Economically, the southeast is vital to Nigeria's trade and production. Stability in this region is crucial for commerce, infrastructure projects, and attracting investment. Prolonged unrest could have ripple effects across national markets. So, the crux of the matter, Tinubu must balance political, legal, social, and economic pressures. Each scenario has risks and benefits. One thing is certain: the country cannot afford inaction, and the way forward must include dialogue, transparency, and genuine efforts at reconciliation.